So, StackWise, 3750s, 3850s, 3950s, they have this lovely, and some of the 2960s, and even the 9000 series, 9200s, 9300s, they have these lovely stacking cables on the back. The data stacking cables allow you to bond a group of switches into a single entity, a single management device. So it just appears to be one switch with lots and lots of ports. The other good thing about StackWise too is that there's also StackWise for power. So you have power redundancy for the StackWise on the back. So that if a power supply fails, then the extra load, extra capacity in the power supplies will just pick up the load of the missing power supply in the middle of the stack. The only caveat is at the moment, it may change because I haven't checked the 9000 series, but with the 3000 series, you can have 9 switches in a stack, but you can only have 4 in a power stack. So you've got to be a bit sort of creative with your power redundancy. So this is a bit more of a diagrammatical form. So we've got 2 switches on the left. So instead of having 2 just isolated switches with a link between them, we've bonded those into a single switch. So ASW1 and ASW2, they present themselves as a single switch. So those 2 ether channels coming from the distribution layer switches, they're not going to have any trouble with spanning tree or anything like that, because as far as they're concerned, there's one switch at the other end and it's got 2 links to it. Now, my facts and figures, 16 gig and 32 gig. I'm pretty sure the new model of StackWise is much faster than that. And StackWise cables, but StackWise cables, the speed comes with a sacrifice. So 50 centimeters, 1 meter, and 3 meters. You cannot do physical stacking across multiple buildings. That just doesn't work. They have to be in the same rack pretty much. So, when you want to build a stack, you need one switch to take charge. So you need to say, all right, your switch number 1, you are going to be priority at 15. So now we need to tell switch 1, there's going to be a switch 3 and there's going to be a switch 4. Now this is a good thing about the StackWise actually, they don't have to be identical families. You can mix and match PoE, you can mix and match some of the characteristics. It's not advised, but it can be done. So once we've provisioned this up, even though we've only got one switch on our bench, if we do a show run, it'll show us, what have we got there, 72 ports. Even though we've only got one physical switch, when you do a show run, we're going to see gigabit 1 to 24, gigabit 2/1 to 24, and gigabit 3/1 to 24, sorry. Now, so all we need to do is get out the second switch and say, all right, switch, new switch, you are now switch number 2, and your priority is now 12. And then we get our switch 3, and we say you are switch 3, and you are priority 10. And then you turn them off, because you got to reboot them for them to be A, renumbered, and B, get their new priority. Oh no, just to be renumbered, you got to reboot them. And they'll just sit there saying I'm switch 2 and I'm switch 3, completely blank. All you got to do is plug the StackWise cables in the back, and they'll automatically bond into the group, and they will just be part of the stack. So you can spend 3 hours programming switch 1 and making it perfect, and then you only need to spend 5 minutes on switch 2 and 3, and you just plug them in and they just get the whole config. That's the other good thing about the stack, is that all switches have a full copy of the running config. So if the master dies, you don't lose anything. You could lose 2 or 3 masters and then just replace them with blank switches, and they'll get their config from the other switches. But if you plug your console cable in the back, they will warn you and say, actually, you know what, I'm not the master, you should plug into the master. So just bear that in mind when you're consoling into them. But if you use SSH or Telnet or PuTTY, they will just logically be a single unit. You won't see 3 switches, you'll just see 1 switch. So, just for fun, show switch detail. So you can see that we've got switch 1's got a little asterisk because he's the master, and he's priority 14. Switch 2 is priority 12, switch 3 is priority 10, and everyone's ready. And the second thing is the ports on the back. So all 6 ports are okay, and you can see how the port 1 on switch 1 goes to 2, and so it's a daisy chain, it's a loop. And then shows ring, because we've done a full loop, and these are only 3750s, we've got 32 gig worth of backplane in the back. The newer 38s and the 9000 series are faster. StackPower, I've already talked about it, but StackPower is a really useful thing. So the photo on the left represents the 38 series, where the stacking data cables are slightly different, but the StackPower cables are still the same. So they share power. It's really awesome. The other good thing you can do is you can get like 4 switches with like mediocre power supplies, and then just get an extra power supply. Because it's a bit hard to see with the photo, but they have 2 power supply slots. So therefore you just put in when you buy 4 switches, you buy 5 power supplies. And then you know that if one power supply fails, or someone pulls the power cord out, those StackPower cables are going to provide fully redundant power throughout all the switches in the stack. So even if the power supplies are at their limit, because you've bought a spare one, then that one's going to take over and there'll be no outage. They'll send you messages and alerts, so you just walk over there, figure out the problem, but there's no outage. That's why StackPower is so great. So once again, show the StackPower. We can see that there's one power plan, and it's got 1750 watts capacity, and it's only allocated 760. So there's a lot of headroom there. And like I say, I haven't actually tested this. I haven't actually gone out there and done a lot of time ripping out the power cables, but based on the math alone, I could pull out like a couple of power cables, and these 4 switches wouldn't even miss a beat. They would be completely happy just to go on, keeping on working, no problem whatsoever. So StackPower, very, very useful piece of redundancy on your network. StackWise cables are awesome, but they have a physical limitation, and that's the physical distance it takes to run that 50 centimeter, 1 meter, or 3 meter cable. So what Cisco have done is said, you know what? We also offer you the traditional old school stacking, and that's a virtual stack. And there's no distance limitation because they use the interfaces on the front. So whatever the limitation is of the interface on the front, that's your limitation. Could be a gigabit connection on copper, could be a gigabit connection on fiber, could be a 10 gigabit connection on fiber, which could go 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers. So that physical distance limitation is now gone, but it's philosophically the same. So instead of having a physical stack that has to be right next to each other, this is a virtual stack, just using standard Ethernet style connections. So now, for our standard setup, we have a switch on the right hand side, 2 switches that are now stacked but using normal Ethernet interfaces. So we go into switch 1 and we say, let's create a domain. So it's like identifying it. We say your switch 1, and then we go do exactly the same command on switch 2, and we say your switch 2, and then we find the interfaces that the 2 are talking to each other on, and then we say switch virtual link 1. Done. Now those 2 switches, so those interfaces won't be used for normal Ethernet anymore. They are now proprietary special connections between those 2 switches, making a virtual switch link. So exactly the same as StackWise on the back, but now using cables on the front. But when you do a show run now, you won't see 2 switches anymore. You'll see 1 switch. Now, like I said, I haven't done this in a lab environment, and there are no labs to do this because we don't have the equipment. But there's plenty of different case studies about setting up virtual switching systems. Thank you very much. See you on the next one.